Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective with your Chief Shark Officer and host. That's me, Kenneth Kinney. So what makes sense to you? The habits we do over and over again may make sense, but are they common sense, especially in your business? For anyone who's ever dealt with the BS that happens at so many corporations, you know how much red tape and bad excuses make up a normal practice. You see it in corporate cultures all the time, where ideas aren't creative to actually fix the problems for customers, and there should be more common sense. I'm so happy to welcome back Martin Lindstrom to the show from a previous interview way back on episode 103. He's a marketing legend, one of Time Magazine's World's 100 Most Influential People, one of the top 50 thought leaders in the world, the author of several New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling books, including Biology, Brandwashed, and Small Data, and he's authored a new one, The Ministry of Common Sense. And on this episode, we'll discuss common sense, transformational change, social media, Happy Meals, Legos, chicken cage syndrome, dirty pins on a plane, removing the CC button from Outlook, fake productivity robots on Amazon, Danish beer, Batman, loves me some Tyra Banks, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a preacher Martin who's on a ministry with your favorite Saint Shark, the patron saint of sharks, on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Martin, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. It's always an honor, and I'm just glad that I didn't scare you away last time. It was, I think, episode 103, which seems like a really long time ago, considering I'm almost 200 episodes away from that. But at the same time, it really wasn't that long ago.
It's crazy. I mean, the sharks behind you, they've grown quite a lot since the first episode. I remember.
Yeah, I think I've grown as large as some of,
No.
some of the larger sharks as well. Yeah, I was glad not that long ago I swam with tiger sharks down in East Florida, and it made me feel better that I was getting close to their size. So maybe they would just think I was one of them and leave me alone. But I was so blessed to have you on my show back then. I'd love to know, in the roughly almost 2 years, what have you been doing with your own life? Obviously, you've got this new book that we're going to talk about, but with your own education in the space, we've all experienced COVID together and the great pandemic that we're going through. But what have you sort of gone through in your own education process in the space we live in and preach every day in the last couple of years?
Well, listen, you can decide to see the world in two different perspectives. One is where you see the glass half full versus half empty. And I've chosen to take the half full version. So as I was swimming in the sea, not with sharks, but in the sea in Sydney Harbour in Australia, about a year ago, as COVID broke out, I got an idea. I said, hey, why don't I write a new article every day about the changes of human psychology due to COVID? And I was so stimulated by what happened, because it's, when you like to observe humans and you see this, it's just very inspiring. And don't get me wrong, I of course respect the whole situation, but it's just fascinating to see this global human experiment almost, right? Which is horrible at the same time. So guess what? I took each of these pages and I compiled them into a book called The Coronavirus for a Biology World. And
It's fantastic. Short book. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. And it really helped me to reframe myself. Now, this is what's so interesting. Remember, I was traveling 300 days a year before this. And over the last year, I traveled once. It's from 300 to 1. It's less than 1%, right? And so I myself had to take this transformation pill, which I'm always giving all my clients. Now I had to swallow it myself. And that was amazing, to experience all the pain and the suffering and I don't want to do it, and I can't do it, and I'm not good enough, and do I have a future, and all that stuff. I went through the whole thing, right? And experienced it from 2 points of view, my own point of view, and Martin sitting on the side fence looking down at this idiot called Martin, which now was struggling to adopt to change exactly the way as all my clients have been struggling. So that has really been fascinating. So what have I done? I've set up studios. We have a pro studio now. We have sound studios, video recording studios across the world. We're running everything digitally right now, no travel at all. We're doing consumer insight into people's homes, with people running around with cameras to understand people's lifestyles. We're doing exactly what we did before, just virtually. Is it as fun? No. Do I miss TSA? No. Do you love sitting in front of Zoom 8 hours a day? No. What's the alternative? COVID-19 vaccine? Let's wait and see, right?
That's a very good point. I think on occasion I probably grabbed the dirtiest box I could in the house, taken off my shoes, put them in the box, slide them through something just to feel like it's some normalcy of travel,
Yeah.
and then get the shoes back and have to spray them
Yeah.
with Lysol before I put them back on. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
so an important question to ask you then, as somebody that was traveling so much, do you still not own a cell phone?
I don't own a cell phone, and I'll never get
Do you have a
a
home
phone.
phone? Do you have a
I
landline?
do have,
Okay,
yes,
good.
and
Good.
I made it work the other day for the
Good.
first time.
I didn't get like a ham radio or.
No. Well, listen, you have to remember I'm cheating in the way that I have Skype on
Yeah,
my
that's true.
laptop, and of course I'm using Zoom and whatever. But no, but I'll tell you one thing here. So remember, the reason why I don't have a phone is because I'm losing creativity. It's this pause, it's the boredom, which is the foundation for creativity. What I've realized as I'm home now is I'm sitting in front of a computer quite a lot, and the phone feeling comes back again. My creativity starts to fade away as I'm sitting straight 8 hours behind a screen. So what I've done is to change my lifestyle. I only sit in front of the screen for 4 hours every day, and then I take the time off just to think and reflect and prepare. And I do that because I do think that creativity is dying because of the VCs we are running on right now. People say that productivity has increased. Up to $1 trillion has been saved in productivity. I think that's true. If you measure productivity in terms of us sitting on Zoom calls, for example, believing that you have to sit on a 1 hour Zoom call, even though you've done all the issues and solved all of it after 35 minutes. And by the way, you also removed all toilet breaks because there is no toilet breaks anymore. It's almost like we stopped going to toilets as we entered this world, right? And also, this is the new world. We've introduced a whole new term. So I don't say hello anymore. The first thing I say to people is you're on mute, right?
Yeah.
This is so what I've come to terms with is that I had to find another balance now, not having a smartphone, but also being able to live with a screen as part of my life. And I don't think I'm alone. I think most people feel like this, right?
Yeah, well, it's a lot better than saying they're on mute than you left your camera on and I can see you on the toilet. That would be a major problem. But you got to get a little bit bored not having Candy Crush or watching TikTok or something else that's worthless, watching everybody else do little creative groupthink dances. But that's
Well, listen,
that's what
I
social media has done.
Yeah, no, I mapped down my levels of, I'm crazy, you know that, but I mapped down my degree of creativity over a month now, just to see when am I most creative. And there was a direct correlation with screen time and creativity. The more screen time, the less creativity. So what I've learned is, and you should try it. It really is interesting
Oh, yeah.
if you dare. So if you write down when are you really creative, you will find out spots which you have to grow and nurture. But you'll also notice if you write down every hour of the day that there is time you are wasting on ridiculous stuff which you're not even aware of, like my YouTube obsession of 1.5 hour watching crap,
Mhm.
concentrated crap every night. And I looked at it and concluded, my God, I spend a whole day in front of this stuff now per month. So I killed it. That's it. I removed all the cookies on my YouTube, and suddenly I had the most ridiculous stuff coming up, and it was just not interesting anymore.
Well, again, this is why you and I've probably spoken about this before, but I hate taking tech into the water when I dive. The last thing I want to do is, metaphorically speaking, spend time looking at my cell phone when I'm in the moment in my happy place in the ocean, and I don't think nearly enough people do that. So, but anyway, we'll get to talking about more serious stuff. So every book you turn out to write, it seems to me is a bestseller, and I've enjoyed reading them. I can't think of one that I haven't enjoyed, especially Brand Sense and Biology and Small Data. They were all brilliant. But what was the inspiration for this one? So the new one is The Ministry of Common Sense: How to Eliminate Bureaucratic Red Tape, Bad Excuses, and Corporate Bullshit Beep. And I really enjoyed this.
What was the last thing you said?
There was a technical glitch. I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But so this is when you have a toddler, and thankfully you put a sticker over this, so I wouldn't have to bleep out myself. But what was the general message about the book, the inspiration, and the audience that you're sort of targeting? Because it would seem to make sense to most people that we need some common sense, but it doesn't.
Yeah. No. Do you know what? A couple of years ago, McDonald's, the former CEO of McDonald's, Charlie Bell, reached out to me and he asked me if I could help him reinvent the Happy Meal. And I said to him, absolutely, I'd love to do it if I can make it healthy. And Charlie was a good man. He gave us a chance. We worked on it. And my goal was to make 6-year-old kids eat broccoli.
Hmm.
So we created the bushes in the forest was the broccoli, the cucumber was the murder weapon, the tomato was the blood. We had this amazing story. Kids loved it. The parents loved it. The franchisee thought it was amazing. I went to Obruk, the headquarters of McDonald's. I showed it to them. I said, this is a huge success in Europe. They said to me, it's interesting. Now, I did not know about that word back then. So I went back to you and said, this thing is interesting, right? Fast forward 2 years, and McDonald's reveals the new Happy Meal. It is the Happy Meal we know today with an apple. And that is the first time I realized how great ideas or deep consumer insights um, is not enough. There is an immune system going on inside an organization, a defense mechanism for change, a straight jacket, so to speak, which are holding people back from adopting change. And so I worked on that. I worked on it for nearly 15 years. We have psychologists working with me every day to understand why is there this red tape. So analyzing 120 companies over the last 15 years, that became the Ministry of Common Sense. And it really is it's first of all, the ministry exists. We set it
Hmm.
up in 7 of the largest companies around the world. But the Ministry of Common Sense is both a piece of irony. It's incredible fun book. You probably would have felt
Yeah,
that when you read it. It's
100%.
you're sort of laughing the whole way through, and you're cringing as well, because I wanted to use humor as a tool for us to realize how stupid we all are. But it also is a book which, in my opinion, is desperately needed right now. Because where did common sense go? I mean, the other day I was boarding a plane heading for Switzerland. And as I boarded the plane, sitting in my seat, there was this announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board in Scandinavian Airlines system. I regret to inform you that all cabin service has been completely suspended on this entire flight, and no one is allowed to use the lavatories in the front. They're exclusively used and occupied for the cabin crew, but you can use the one lavatory in the very back of the plane. Now, we were 172 passengers. Now, we had to pass by every one of the 36 aisles, going down to the lavatory where we would infuse this beautiful toilet smell mixed up with a nice aroma of COVID. I mean, where's the logic here? Where's the logic that I'm sitting filling out a form? It's a contact tracing form. Let me just straight. A contact tracing form is where you trace contacts, right? The first question on the form is, have you ever sat in a near proximity to anyone over the last 12 hours? The only thing you have to do is to look to your right where there's a passenger sitting half an inch away from you. So you can get that person's name if you want that. And the second question is, have you ever touched anything within the last 12 hours which have been in contact with others? Now, guess what? No one has a pen these days because we're all using tablets. So one bright person at row 1 borrows a pen from the stewardess. And once he used it, he lends it back to the next one. And that's the pen I'm sitting with my fingers, which have been touching 132 passengers. So I had to click yes on that one too. I mean, TSA recently announced that you can bring as much hand sanitizer as you will on board on the plane, but there's only a 3-ounce restriction on all other liquids. Where's common sense? I just don't get it. So I wrote the book.
Yeah, it's fantastic. There's so many thoughts. I wish, dating back to the McDonald's reference, I wish you could have given him some insight, though, as far as the Chinese spam and Oreo burger sandwich. I'm not sure that was the best one, but I don't know. No, and I'm going to have to show you this picture that I just thought about. This is, if it'll show up, and I may have to turn something off here. This is me on a plane going to dive with sharks. And my wife was not the least bit worried about me diving with sharks. She was worried
This is
about,
crazy.
she was worried. And I mean, this is what I was up against. large tiger shark. She wasn't the least bit worried about me diving with sharks. She was worried about the person next to me breathing or sneezing or coughing or whatever. And
That is
and
really
it
funny.
that it kind of goes with that. But no, it's a
It goes with
very
it.
funny. The stories are great. And I want to read a quick passage from this book.
Sure.
Goes to your point. In nearly every company you work with today, you set up a ministry of common sense devoted to overturning the frustrations, hurdles, or roadblocks within corporations that most leaders and managers don't even know are there. And by the way, the ministry isn't some cloying, whimsical, feel good jurisdiction either. It's not a band aid, it's real. And I'll end there, but that hits everyone at every company ever. It's not the largest, it's not the smallest, it's all of them. And I equated the experience that I had at one of the last large brands that I worked with as the equivalent of, the lion or the gorilla at the zoo. And it's that look of defeat, if you will, in their eyes. When you write a lot of these books, you're somebody that the CEOs will listen to, but there are so many people that are clamoring below that are in manager, senior manager, director, senior director, VP, SVP roles that are screaming about this as well.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so much of a problem that people know is a common sense thing but can't be fixed
Well, first of all,
or
let's just
addressed?
define, let's just define common sense for a second. Common sense is seeing things as they are and doing things as they ought to be done. Or said in another way, it is to treat customers and employees as they themselves would expect to be treated. And this is the issue. As a company grows, you are detaching yourself from reality. Let me explain. Um, some years ago, two young kids were sitting in the dome room in the university, off their head smoking weeds. And one of the kids, he shot a photo of the other guy, uploaded on social. Of course, the parents heard about it. They freaked out. Everything was chaos. The day after, the one guy said to the other, why doesn't exist a service where you can retract those photos? That would be great. And that was the foundation of Snapchat, a $50 billion company. When you are founding a new company, it's based on empathy. And this is what's so interesting. There's a direct correlation between common sense and empathy. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of another person and see and feel what the other person is feeling. And what's fascinating here is that when you are an entrepreneur, you feel the pain, or you feel the suffering, or you feel the hope or the joy, and that generates an idea, a concept, a product, a service, or an innovation. And that sticks with you because you're the founder, because you know exactly how you felt. That drives you through that process, sticking to your core and your belief, and then gathering a lot of people around you, which becomes believers. But as a company grows, you certainly will see the founders like Google are moved to the side. You will see certainly that there's legal and compliance coming in, protecting you for not losing what you have. And certainly the water has washed through the whole organization, so much so that that emotion, that empathy is gone. And that's what we're seeing today. Larger corporations defined by three things: larger, older, commodity. They typically have the highest degree of nonsense, which is the opposite of common sense. Um, the smaller companies, the more entrepreneurial, the more common sense they have because the more empathy they have. So if you are stuck in an organization and you are frustrated about this common sense issue, my advice to you is to adopt another point of view and have other people joining you. And I can give you a quick example on that. Quick example is 2 minutes. So one of our clients is Maersk. It's the largest shipping company in the world, sits on 21% of all trade. Now, Maersk is suffering from what everyone else does in the industry, a word which you never heard about before, which is rolling. Rolling means that if you have a container and you're shipping it from destination A to B, that it actually may not leave the port. If someone else is paying a higher fee to have their container ship boarding that ship, yours will stay for another day or another week or another something, and you won't even be informed. That's called rolling. 30% of all containers in the world are rolled every week. That's a huge thing. Now, I looked at them and said, you must be crazy. I mean, if I have flowers coming from Bogota to whatever, they would be dead. And they said, no, it's not too bad. We are 5% better at rolling than everyone else in the industry. So that was my starting point. This is a point called frustration, okay?
Yeah.
You are drinking of the Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid is another reality. You see the world in a different perspective from inside out. So what did we do to change this? I said to them, and this is the technique, why don't we try to see the world from another point of view? What company do you really admire outside your industry? They were thinking a lot about that. They said Amazon, they said Uber. I said, great, let's take Uber. What would happen? Listen to this. This is important. What would happen if Maersk bought Uber?
Yeah.
Not Uber buying Maersk, but Maersk bought Uber. And suddenly it was like a penny dropped. People said, yeah, you're right. Suddenly I will be sitting in this Uber, paying my fare, and then halfway through, another person will bid a higher fare. So they'll kick me off in the middle of the road. Another person will jump in. And suddenly they could see the scenario. We had 88,000 people, staff around the world brainstorming this. We created animated videos. People looked at it. They laughed. They thought it was so funny. And then I said, that's you. And at that stage, we had empathy infused into the organization. And do you know what the result is? The NPS, so the Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction, went up 250% last year at Maersk. The share price tripled, in 2020, tripled. And it all came back to them reinstalling this entrepreneurial spirit, which they once had, but which is gone.
Can you imagine if they had those sort of statistics and they were responsible for delivering the vaccine?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly. Well, this is a very good question. I was just interviewed by a guy from Financial Times yesterday, and we talked a lot. He was from London, and we talked a lot about what should they do differently in the UK to roll this out. And what I said to them again, look at it from a different perspective. There's two things you have to have in mind. One is, why didn't they test run the distribution before you had the vaccine? We all knew we would get the vaccine. We were warned about 6 months ago with that, right? Maybe it was a month late or half a year late, but why don't you test it just as you would test the Olympic Games rollout before it's starting? Everyone is doing it. So test, how would you distribute it? The second thing is try to be creative. Find people which are really good at distribution. Who is that? Well, what would happen if the Amazon bought the US government? Or the healthcare sector, or even better,
or Pfizer.
Pfizer, right? Or what, and this will be very clever, who is really good at handling crowds? Well, from my point of view, it's airports. Well, guess what? The airports are running at 10% capacity right now. A lot of airports are closed. Why don't we do the vaccine distribution out of the airports? Right? Why don't we go into these big corporations which have in-house doctors and use them to inject their employees? No, this is a different way of thinking, but common sense is, well, let's do the ordinary system as we always done. But the problem is we've never done this before. We've never injected 7 billion people on planet Earth, right? So we cannot go the ordinary way. And that is my message. See the world from another point of view.
The conversation will quickly turn to, now the vaccine came too fast, so we were unprepared. It took 5 years for the last major vaccine to come out. Now that we've gotten it less than a year, then people are going to say, well, we needed more time to plan. It'll be something ridiculous. But, you cite politics and divide in the book as well, which is pretty damn apparent right now. But how much of the divide do you think is also how social media has reshifted the focus and the thinking on me rather than us, or rather than the focus on the customers that we serve?
Well, it's a good question. Let me just take this into perspective first, and then I'll answer the question. So remember, common sense equals empathy. Empathy has never been lower in our universe. And I want to put this into perspective. The reason why we as human beings are as prominent on planet Earth as we are is because we have a third layer in our brain which enable us to have empathy. That's the reason why when we were hunting animals, we could kind of imagine what the other animal would do, and that's the reason why we survived. So empathy really has been a sophisticated, refined skill which has made human beings what we are today. Now, here's the scary part. Recent studies now show that empathy levels are 50% of what they were a decade ago. And it's disappeared for multiple reasons, three main reasons. The first reason is that we actually are communicating differently through our facial expressions. An experiment done with babies and mothers, where mothers were not moving their face at all. You can find this video on YouTube for 1 minute while the baby was looking at the mom. Well, the baby would throw a tantrum in 30 seconds because the connection would be disconnected. Now, when we have Botox, you will actually notice that people which have Botox has less empathy because you can't connect with people. You will notice when I try to communicate things through Twitter on 280 characters, how do I express emotions that way? How do I put things into a context rather than just being black and white? And then we come to social media. Everything, all algorithms are surrounded around me. Not only do I look at a little stamp-sized photo of myself on Zoom 24/7, which is the reason why the number of plastic operations has increased with 300% in the US the last 6 months, but what we're also seeing happening at the moment is that you create these echo chambers. It's self-fulfilling bubbles, which are reinforcing my own opinion, reaffirming that what I'm saying and what I think and what I do is right. And that is like a muscle. What I've learned is you can train your empathy muscle. The more you see the world from other point of view, the more you respect and actually are stimulated by it. But the less you do that, the more you lose that skill set. We are now losing that skill. And that comes back to the point of view, what you're asking me about. Social media, in my opinion, is probably 90% of the reason why we're seeing what's happening right now. Because yes, there's always conflict in society. And yes, there's always a lot of people which feel frustrated and not heard. These people have got a very big microphone right now. And that microphone is further amplified, where I'm pretty sure these people would respect certain opinions if they were fed to them in a natural way. And let me just explain that. Bill Bernbach, which is the founder of BBDO, or one of the founders of BBDO, he always had a little note in his pocket. Whenever he would have a conflict with people, a disagreement with people, a fight with people, in the very last minute, he will grab a little piece of paper in his pocket and read what it was on it. And it had 5 words. What if he was right? What if he was right? And we don't have that piece of paper in our pockets anymore on neither side. We don't want to hear each other because we hear everything from our point of view, and that becomes self-fulfilling. That's the reason why democracy is in a crisis, because democracy fundamentally is to see the world from another point of view.
So one of my favorite chapters was chapter 8, the fear and loathing in the corporate world. And I'd love for you to kind of explain and unpack what that means to you, because it's such a seductive title, but I think it really also creates a lot of the climate that a lot of companies are in right now with how they make this transformational change.
Well, the chapter is really starting with the chicken cage syndrome. And the chicken cage syndrome is back to a study which was done about 4 years ago, where chickens were put into a cage, stuck into that cage for half a year. And one day they were let out on the beautiful green grass. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and they went out. And guess what happened after 30 seconds? They went straight back in again. And I call that the chicken cage syndrome. It is a defense mechanism for change. We're all stuck in a chicken cage. That is really the idea of seeing the world from inside out. Your goal is really to reverse that point of view, to get the chickens out. And one of the ways to get a chicken out of the chicken cage is to understand the psychology of this. So let me just try to explain this and imagine what I'm saying here. If I take 4 chicken cages and I see them from the top, they're standing in a square, so they're all pointing to a square, and I'm now opening the gates. And I'll place a piece of corn in the middle of the square with an equal distance to all these 4 open chicken cages. Will the chicken go out and eat the corn? Well, the answer is no, even though you should think it should be where you place this corn to get them out. And so why is that? Because the first thing the chicken will do is to look out and say, my God, that's a heck of a distance to get into that corn. My KPIs, I'm not measured against that. Now, why should I do? What if my manager is being fired? I'll look like a stupid idiot to go that far to do this big change. So the second thing the chicken will do is to look at the other chicken. The other chicken will look at the third at you. Everyone will look at everyone, and they'll go straight back into the cage. This is the biggest problem in transformation. The biggest problem is that transformation quite often today is long term. No one has a patience for that. An average CEO is in his job for 4 years or her job for 4 years, an average employee for 2.5 years. We don't have patience for waiting. So here's what I tend to do. I tend to place a corn straight outside the chicken cage. I call that a 90-day intervention. It's a bite-sized little piece of goodie. You eat it, and do you know what you do then? You celebrate. You celebrate the hell out of it. And all the other chickens are looking and say, look at this chicken, how happy it is. My God, I better eat that before someone else does it. And they celebrate, and everyone celebrates. And then you put another piece of corn a little bit straight outside, and it goes a little bit further, and that is transformation. That is the core of transformation. So if I take the metaphor aside for a second, what I'm saying here is to create bite-sized celebrations within an organization. And that could be anything. I mean, I'll give you an example. I'll do a corporate inside-out example. So one of the largest banks around, which we work with, and which, I did these workshops around the world, and I asked the staff, what are you most frustrated about? And everyone raised their hand. I mean, I had 1,200 people in this room for a whole day. So I went around and they said, emails. How many emails do you guys receive? I said to them, on average, 800 emails a day. Now, let's just do the math. Do you have a calculator here? Let's say that I'm reading one email and it takes 1 minute to read it and reply back. That's 800 minutes. That's basically 6.5 hours or something a day. Okay, just an email. I haven't even done my work at this stage. So I said to them, do you know there's a direct correlation between the number of emails you send and the number of emails you receive? No, they didn't know that. So what if we halve this? Would you be up for it? And they looked at me and said, how do you want to do that? We'll remove the CC button on your Microsoft Office, the CC button. And they looked at me like a deer in the headlight. I said, yeah, we'll remove it. And immediately, of course, the guy from compliance raised his hand. Well, we can't do that. Then people don't read the emails. Okay, let's try and go back again now. I said to everyone, how many of you are reading the CCs? Honestly, you have 800 emails. How many of you honestly read more than 5 of the CCs yesterday?
Yeah.
7 people raised their hand. They were all in compliance. Okay, you get my point? You don't read that CC. It's like washing your hands. Let's get rid of it. So we did a vote. We got rid of the CC button in the entire bank. It doesn't exist in Microsoft Outlook anymore. And the number of emails dropped to 330 in average per day. There was one little bite-sized 90-day intervention we did as an experiment. It became real, and more than 160,000 employees now have no CC buttons.
And so many of them think of it as some sort of badge of honor to tell you that they have 800 emails to go read and work on, as opposed to focusing on one customer to help them fix that problem.
Well, this is the same as people saying, how many Zoom calls? I had 13 today.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I did one Zoom call while I was doing another team and one Jeans call at the same time. Okay, let's just get to the point here. What is it you're delivering here? What is the output? Is this just to tick a box and have your little stamp-sized photo on that screen? Where is the common sense here? It's kind of gone. Companies now today have software installed with a monitor that you actually are online all the time and you're sitting on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I know people which literally have changed the setting. So instead of checking in every 7 minutes, they can change it up to 20 minutes. They literally will go and say, okay, now I have 20 minutes off now. And they run out to get some cigarettes. They come back again. Oh, that was 1 minute before deadline. They move around with the cursor and then they run out to go out with the dog. So they literally build up the days in 19 minutes intervals because that's how productivity is defined.
Yeah. Somebody needs to invent a robot that basically moves your mouse and touches the touchpad and
I'm not
types in
kidding. You
keys.
can buy that already. You can buy that already. It exists. Go out on Amazon and say
Oh my
robot
God.
hand mouse movement ensuring no tracking.
Fantastic.
That's a keyword. You can get it. It costs $72 and you can get two for the price of one.
That's great. Well, so in the next chapter, you offer, it's going to be hard to transition. So in the next chapter, you offer a prescription on how to make the change, which is fantastic, especially with empathy. It becomes sort of a subject that a lot of people have a hard enough time just wrapping around how to fix this. But I encourage everybody to read this book. But at a high level, what should somebody take away from this podcast, at least how to create and implement change? What's the big picture, if you will, on how you want people to address this?
If you were to map down your day and put it into four buckets, there would be one bucket which says waste of time. One would be park. One would be that's really good. And one would be improve. If you try to do that with your everyday life now, remember the lifestyle you and I and everyone listening have is profoundly different than it was January 2020. My mission here is very simple. There is no going back to work. I call it going forward to work. So why don't you redefine the way you work rather than applying the way you worked in the past to how you work in the future? Now, what you would realize as you start to note down all the stuff you do every day is probably that around 30 to 35% of what you do every day is waste. It is not common sense. It's a habit from the past. It's routines you've done. Was it just plain ridiculous? So that's my first mission for you. That is to say, try to do that. What you would realize is there'll be one thing among those elements which you actually can improve. It's a friction. It's a thing where you just with a little light touch as it can improve it. Do it. Just one thing. Just one thing.
Everybody wants a hack and a tip and a trick and all this kind of stuff. And you're, I did this and I just noticed myself, you're one of the few people that when I've recorded an episode, I have to stop myself from taking notes about what you say so I can remind myself, this is what I need to open my brain up and listen to more. I wish more people do this. And I hope a lot of people get that out of reading the book and listening to you as well. But this is toward the end of the show where we get to really kind of know you better. What do you do for fun? What do you do, especially now for fun?
I get drunk.
Do you? Danish beer?
Danish beer, bring on anything as long as it has a percentage time behind. Yeah. Listen, I get drunk, I get silly, and I take long walks. I spend time with friends if I'm allowed to with these COVID times. I spend a lot of time with people. And I become a child because here's the issue. I believe you may recall this in one of my previous books. I think it was Small Data, where I introduced the term of having an inner child, twin age. And we all have two ages. And my inner age, my twin age, is really 12 years of age. So I feel like a kid on the inside, even though I'm 50 years, right? So I maintain my inner child. I become silly and drunk and crazy. Do you know what? I think it's a way for me to reset myself. A little bit like when you defragment your brain. So I do that and I swim a lot and swim like with you. You and I talked a lot about this. Being in water stimulates my creativity. It's like a meditation. I bet you it's the same for you. And
Oh, absolutely.
That is my creative zone, is your creative zone. You have to nurture that space. You have to grow that space. Don't let other stuff, don't let technology kill it. As seductive as it is, what makes you different from other people is that side, is not your ability to click on a mouse.
Hundreds of dives I've been on, I've maybe taken a GoPro in 3 times.
Yeah.
And people were telling me that because I needed to do more stuff for social. I'm like, no, I need to have my own little reset deprivation tank, and that's I'm not going to interfere with that. So I agree with you. So Martin, I don't think I got to ask you this last time, but what is your favorite kind of shark and why? I know you've done diving with sharks before.
I like the hammer shark. I do. Yeah. I do like the hammer shark because it's such a peculiar design, if you could use the word design, and it has some traits, and the traits of the hammer, which is absolutely unique. So that would be my favorite.
It's one of my favorites to swim with. They're absolutely beautiful. But the
Yep.
perspective that they have of the world in the water, being able to see it from all angles, is sort of how I've equivocated the ways that I've worked for as a publisher. I've worked as an entrepreneur. I've worked for the
Yeah.
brand and as an agency and in the data
Yeah.
side. Just being able to take that holistic view
Yeah.
is what Hammerhead's, those eyes, those strange
Yeah.
eyes, and that Quasimodo head is really allowed them to do.
You
So
got it. You got it. And that's my point. As I'm always talking about seeing the world from different points of view, whether that's common sense or empathy or that work I've done over the years, that's exactly the reason why I like the Hammer Shark.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and that's why I called it a shark's perspective. It was sort of a
Yeah.
metaphor for me for the various ways I look at problems
Yeah.
and problem solving. So, Martin, it's that special time of the show again. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready. I'm
All right.
nervous.
So, you're a Lego fan. The Lego Batman movie or Ninjago?
Oh, Batman.
Really important questions, as you can
Yeah,
tell.
it
All
is.
right.
Yeah, very important. Yeah.
Number 2. This one may be a tough one for you.
Okay.
Morgan Spurlock or Tyra Banks? And I've seen you both on his movie, the greatest movie ever sold. Just email it to a friend of mine to watch. And I also sadly will admit on air that I've seen you on the episode of you on America's Next Top Model, because my wife used to watch the show and I got
Oh,
sucked into watching it. So
I like Tara Banks. She's, beside being super sexy and good looking, I have to
yeah,
say that she's a child inside as well. We're both 12 years of age, and Tara, she's building up her theme park right now in LA, and of course is having her challenges with that. But no, I like her, and I like her because she's very willing to listen. I've been her mentor for some time, and I think she listens a lot. She runs her own segment in one of the bigger universities as well. She's really a remarkable person. So is Morgan, but Tara has really grown up, I would
yeah,
say.
and it doesn't hurt to be a beautiful supermodel.
No,
And she's
yeah.
a handsome woman. So number 3, Tivoli Gardens or the Lego house in Billund? Probably pronounced Billund.
Lego house in Billund.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Billund.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more on that. So having seen both, number 4, TSA pre-check or clear?
Clear.
Why so?
Because clear is a little bit more sleek. I like the design with the blue colors and the white colors. People actually smile a little bit more. The TSA pre-check, they don't really smile. I don't think they were instructed to smile. I think they were instructed just to get you through that system before they could go on a lunch break.
Yeah, David Letterman used to say that when he would go get his driver's license photo, he would go in drunk. So if they pulled him over, and the police officer would think that's what he looked like. I think it was David Letterman, but makes me think of the way people take their passport pictures and things like that.
Yeah.
And number 5, I don't know if you remember this one, the most important question you're going to be asked today. And if you change the answer from last time, it's okay. Biscuits or cornbread?
I would have said cornbread.
Okay. So Martin, where can people get a copy of this book, find out more about you and all your experiences, see you virtually or in person as we open back up?
Well, thank you. Well, it's the Minister of Common Sense. It's out the 19th of January, and you can get it on Amazon and everywhere else, or you can find me on martinlindstrom.com. Or you can find me, of course, on Twitter. It's hashtag Martin Lindstrom, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or, of course, on Facebook.
Outstanding. Martin, again, it's an honor and a privilege, and so thankful to have you again today on A Shark's Perspective.
Likewise, and keep up your good work.
Thank you. So there was my conversation with Martin Lindstrom, a marketing legend, one of Time Magazine's World's 100 Most Influential People, author of several New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling books, including his newest, The Ministry of Common Sense. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, since we're talking about a ministry, amen, and please put the phone down. It's killing our creativity tremendously, and you know it. Always on doesn't mean always good, productive, creative, etc. Ever look at your screen time report and think, what could you have done with some of that time? All that time spent, especially on social media, isn't helping you have more empathy or stay more connected. And I could not agree more with everything Martin says about social media. It has completely distorted the way we communicate with others. I see people preach empathy a lot of times with a lot of self-promotional only posts, and then they don't treat others well just because they aren't part of the same social tribe. I wish we could all spend more time looking up at others with a smile than looking down at a post wondering how many likes and shares it's gotten. That seems to be some common sense. Can I get an amen to that? Second, great ideas are not enough, and the book does a great job of describing that something that holds people back. Why is there red tape? With all the I's that we create to dot and the T's we create to cross, have you ever wondered for your own customers, if not even your own employees, where did common sense go? Common sense is treating customers as you would want to be treated, yet we detach ourselves from reality. So why can't you look at things differently? He sets up a ministry of common sense in corporations that he works with trying to create transformational change. Think of it this way. If you had a not common sense list of what happens in your company and you were going to be given a magic wand to fix it, then it wouldn't likely take a Harry Potter to come up with a very long list of things that just don't make sense and need to change. See the world from another point of view, or as many views as you can, other than one that keeps the chickens confining themselves to a cage. Third, I absolutely love that at the end of the book, he writes a brief one more thing, and that one more thing addresses applying this mindset not only to how we see businesses transform, but also to how we look at ourselves. It's easy to imagine always being the company whisperer who will change these companies for the better. But take a look in the mirror and simply ask yourself if you're creating a lot of nonsense in your own life with bad habits that you need to fix to get out of some of this lunacy. As I said, it's why I listen to someone like Martin and take as many notes on a personal nature as I do from a business standpoint. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Now it's time to be humble, transformational, make common sense, and it's always a good time for an amen. Join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.